Hey guys, hoping all is well with everybody. In this video, we will be concluding our read-along of The Secret Zoo by Brian Chick. The last time we ended off, we finished chapter 51, so we'll be starting with chapter 52 today. And as always, guys, please feel free to follow along, and I'll be showing you any pictures as we come across them. Chapter 52, The Cave. The Sasquatch crept forward. Its long, knotted tufts of hair swung from its arms and knees, and its ape-like grunts rumbled inside the walls of the cave. As Noah's eyes adjusted to the new darkness, he could make out the creature's claws. Long and swollen, they looked infected. Noah backpedaled, searching for any idea of what to do next. The only way out seemed to be the way they'd come in. Something jabbed at his back. He shrieked, certain that it was the claw of another Sasquatch, and spun around. There was Podgy. Noah had stepped into his bill. Together, Podgy and Noah retreated farther into the cave to keep space between the Sasquatch and themselves. Noah focused on the flag in the Sasquatch's hand with the letters A and S. There was no doubt. It was Megan's distress flag. A soft voice came from the back of the cave. Noah! Noah, is that you? Someone was standing in the shadows. Megan? It's me! They ran into each other's arms. Noah went limp with relief, and for a second he worried that he might collapse. He pulled his head back for a look at his sister and fought to raise her image from the darkness. She looked thin and tired. She managed to keep her glasses, and her pigtails, still in place, were matted and dirty. I saw it all, Megan said. I saw the wall explode, I saw the animals charge in, and somehow I knew it was you. I had my flag and I used it, but that awful thing saw me. It took my flag and lured you in here, and you... Megan glanced at Podgy and changed her thought. Was that penguin just flying? Yes. When did he learn to do that? About 2 minutes ago, I guess. What? Never mind that now. We gotta get out of here. Swaying back and forth, the Sasquatch moved closer. It was hunched over to keep its head from dragging along the ceiling of the cave. The ugly beast dropped the flag and stepped on it. What now, Podgy? Noah asked. Podgy glanced at his friend, nodded his head, and suddenly charged forward, directly at the Sasquatch. When he reached the creature, he ducked and darted through its legs. The beast swiped at Podgy, lost his balance, and nearly toppled over. Podgy whirled around and dashed back between its hairy limbs. The Sasquatch lashed out once more and just missed the elusive penguin. In disgust, it rolled back its head and let out an ape-like roar that boomed and echoed against the walls of the cave. Is your friend trying to get us killed? Megan asked. Noah paused for a moment. Then he said, He's trying to save us. What? How? He's distracting him, knocking him off balance. For what? Noah turned to Megan and smiled. Want to go for a ride on a penguin? Excuse me? I think he wants to carry us out of here, both at the same time. Can he do that? We'll find out. Podgy waddled back toward Noah and Megan, ran a full circle around them, and charged the Sasquatch again. He's ready, Noah said. Are you? No. Fear rippled her voice. Not at all. Noah gave his sister a peck on the cheek. I never thought I'd say this, but I've missed you. He turned around, faced the Sasquatch, and took a deep breath. A second later, he charged, screaming, Rah! Megan raced behind him, shrieking and pumping her arms at her sides. Stunned, the Sasquatch stepped back. Then, as if it remembered how big and ominous it was, the beast stepped forward, raised its meaty hands, and showed its dreadful claws. Podgy ducked again, posturing to shoot between its legs. Seeing this, the Sasquatch leaned down to grab him, but this time the penguin pounced on its head and hopped over. The Sasquatch spun around to grab the bird, but missed again. Podgy had distracted the creature long enough for Megan and Noah to escape through its legs and head for the opening of the cave. Run, Podgy! Noah screamed. Podgy was already racing for the exit faster than Noah had ever seen him move. The Sasquatch dropped onto its knuckles like an ape and chased him. At the mouth of the cave, the scouts braced themselves. I don't think this is going to work, Megan shrieked. There's no time to think, Noah shouted. A moment later, Podgy blasted out of the cave into the stormy sky. Noah leaped onto his back and grabbed his neck. When he expected to feel Megan land behind him, instead he felt nothing. He looked over his shoulder. The wretched Sasquatch had clasped Megan by the ankle and was dangling her over the cliff. The beast had nabbed her in a mid-jump. "Podgy!" Noah yelled. "That thing's got my sister!" Podgy flew in a wide arc and navigated along the mountainside. As he passed the cave, he whacked the Sasquatch's head with his flipper. The Sasquatch floundered on the cliff, flailing its arms. Then it lost its grip on Megan's ankle, and both of them fell over the edge, plummeting toward the murky ground below. Podgy dived so suddenly that Noah nearly toppled on his back. The penguin swooped beside Megan, and at just the right moment, Noah reached out and snagged his sister by the wrist. The dive and catch was a spectacular feat, but Megan's additional weight was too much for Podgy to bear. The penguin lost control and crashed into the top of a tall, full tree. The threesome fell through the branches, bouncing off the large ones and crashing through the thin ones until they landed with a series of thuds at the base of the trunk. Twigs and leaves showered down on them. "Everyone okay?" Megan asked. "Yeah," Noah said. "Podgy, you okay?" Podgy stood up and shook his body the way a wet dog does. Noah looked around. He realized that they must have been a sensational sight in the air, because the Sasquatches were approaching from every direction, dodging trees and leaping over bushes. Within seconds, the scouts were surrounded by a small gang of them. They were grunting, snorting, and looking anxious to rip limbs from bodies. A lightning bolt split the sky, and the yellow of their eyes glowed. The beasts scrambled to clear a pathway for a single Sasquatch to come forward. The newcomer walked with a limp, and it had a swollen bald patch on the side of its head. It looked as if it had been smacked with a large stick, or maybe something of equal size and shape, like a penguin's flipper. "Not good," Noah said. The scouts and Podgy backed against the tree. "Sorry, Megan," Noah said. I thought I could get you out of here." Megan scanned the dark landscape for an escape. "It's not over yet," she said. "There's no way out," Noah said. "Not unless you come up with a miracle." "I think it's coming our way." Their miracle was charging toward them from behind the Sasquatches. Storming through the muddy forest were Ella, Richie, Tank, Blizzard, Little Bighorn, Dodie, Marlo, P-Dog, and a bunch of other prairie dogs. Ella was riding on Little Bighorn, and Richie was on Blizzard. They plowed into the Sasquatches and sent them flying. Some landed in the trees unconscious, draped over the branches like laundry that was hung out to dry. Panic-stricken, the remaining creatures scattered. Blizzard growled. Little Bighorn snorted. The prairie dogs yipped like mad. "Guys!" Noah shouted. "What are you doing back here?" Tank said, "Marlo spotted Podgy soaring through the air like a little blimp. We knew something was up when you flew into that cave." Megan ran to greet Ella and Richie, shouting, "I didn't know if I'd ever see you." Tank swooped Megan up and slung her on top of Little Bighorn behind Ella. "Maybe we should save hugs and kisses for later," he boomed. "What do you say?" "Good idea," Ella said. She swatted the rhino's side and called, "Come on, Little Bighorn, let's ride." Noah turned to Tank. "Thanks for—" Before he could finish, Tank lifted him up by his pants and tossed him on top of Blizzard. "No time for chit-chat, kid. Any second now, Mr. Darby's gonna close up shop, if you know what I'm saying. I asked him to keep the wall down for 10 more minutes. 10 minutes? Noah said. "Less than that now." Noah adjusted himself between Richie and said, "You hear him, Blizz? Let's get out of here." As Blizzard raced off, Noah glanced over his shoulder. The prairie dogs were scurrying behind them as fast as their short legs could run. In the sky, Dodie and Marlo were joined by Podgy, their newfangled flying friend. Tank was on his way to the exit when a Sasquatch, a huge one, with a chunk of hair missing from the side of its swollen face, grabbed him from behind. Tank swung around and knocked it out with a single punch. "Sometimes," Noah muttered, "things end on a high note." The motley herd of animals raced across the Darklands, back to the City of Species. Noah thought of bringing Megan home, and 100 of emotions washed over him. He was so overcome by love, joy, and relief that he started to cheer and wave his arms. The other scouts looked at him with big smiles. They too yelled and pumped their fists. That moment assured them nothing would ever divide their friendship. No enchanted lands, no beastly creatures, and not even time. Real friendship was stronger than anyone else in the world. They charged ahead and reached the exit. The instant they barreled through, the elephants dropped the boulders. The moment the boulders slammed the street, a troop of monkeys sprang into action, sliding the velvet curtains down from the branches to seal off the dark lands. Once again, the city of species was safe under the magic that had issued from the fingertips of three mystical brothers from a distant land. Chapter 53. Goodbye. The scouts stood beside the curtain to Sector 15, ready to go home, a place Megan had not been for 3 long weeks. Mr. Darby, Tank, and the scouts' animals' friends stood beside them. Tank said, "About Megan." The scouts waited for more. When nothing came, Noah said, "Yeah, I met with a few of the descenders. We came up with a plan about—" "The who?" Ella asked. Tank shook off the question. "Never mind who they are for now. Just know that I talked to them, and we have an idea to hide the reason Megan disappeared. We thought of something to tell your parents, your world, about Megan, about what happened to her. It would keep the secrets of the zoo safe." Noah was genuinely curious. "Let's hear it." Tank started talking, and for the next 10 minutes the scouts listened and nodded and asked questions. After hearing the plan, they agreed to try it. Noah thought it was a great idea. He just didn't know if they could pull it off. Finally, Noah turned to Mr. Darby and asked, "What about the Sasquatches? How many got out?" "It's difficult to say. We posted koalas in the trees. They spotted around 50. "What will we do?" Megan asked. "The Sasquatches, I mean." "Perhaps nothing," Mr. Darby said, "but I fear that I'm thinking wishfully." "I feel terrible," Richie said. "It's like—" "Please don't. You rescued your friend. This was your duty. What's more, in rescuing Megan, I believe you rescued us." "Rescued you?" Ella said. "How?" "The Megan situation is over, and the division it created in the secret society will no longer exist. We'll be united again. We need unity to focus on our task, which is protecting the secret zoo, its animals, and its magic." "I wish I could help," Noah said. Mr. Darby raised one eyebrow. "Well, you can. We need crossers, people that pass between the outside and the inside. We need good people, adventurous people. Scouts would do nicely." "Action scouts," Tank said and winked. "Mr. Darby," Ella said, we're only kids." "Only kids!" Mr. Darby barked. He laughed and patted her head. "Only kids! Look at all you've done! The Action Scouts are much more than kids, I assure you." Noah said, "I'm not sure if—" Mr. Darby raised his palm. "Think about it. For now, go back to your homes and families. Before we leave, I'd like to say a few goodbye to my friends." Noah ran to Blizzard, who waited behind Mr. Darby with solemn eyes and his ears pressed flat against his head. Noah wrapped his arms around him. "Goodbye, Blizz," he said. "I'll miss you." Ella and Richie ran to either side of Blizzard and squeezed the giant polar bear, burying their cheeks in his furry sides. Blizzard rolled his head back and roared. His voice echoed off the city walls, and the birds in the tree branches erupted into mournful chirping and cawing. The scouts said goodbye to Little Bighorn and Marlo and Dodie and Tank. Richie bent down to the group of prairie dogs that lay at his feet, and P-Dog sprang up. Richie scratched him behind the ears and said, "Listen, if you guys find the gorilla that stole my shoes, do me a favor and drop them in the mail." Petting Podgy's feathered head, Megan said, "Thanks for everything, little dude. Without you, I'd still be trapped in that cave." Noah looked at Podgy. "I can hardly believe we did it," he said as he leaned forward to hug the big penguin. Then Podgy did a remarkable thing. He wrapped his flippers around Noah and hugged him back. "Whoa, boy, easy with those flippers," Noah said. "Those are your ticket to the sky." Podgy flapped his flippers and noticed that, for the first time, the penguin didn't look sad and bored. Light gleamed in his eyes. "It wasn't his flippers that got him flying," Mr. Darby said. "It was the strength of his spirit." That's a power you showed him." Noah smiled and gazed affectionately at Podgy, who was still flapping his flippers. "Goodbye, Podge. I'll see you around, huh? At Penguin Palace in the Clarksville Zoo. Or—" Noah glanced at the animals and the trees and the streets of the City of Species. "Or elsewhere." As the scouts walked toward the door that led homeward, Mr. Darby called out, You all think about it, then. My proposition. A society as great as ours could use your help." The children's eyes met briefly, and Noah replied, "Keep in touch, Mr. Darby. You know how." "Indeed I do," the old man said with a grin. "Indeed I do." The Action Scouts, complete again, with Megan back, waved goodbye to Mr. Darby, Tank, Blizzard, Podgy, Little Bighorn, and the other animals who had gathered to see them off. Pandas, cheetahs, kangaroos, tigers, turtles, and countless others. They lined the streets, the buildings, and the trees. Hot tears formed in Noah's eyes. The only thing that stopped them from falling was the awareness that he was leaving the magic and the beauty of the secret zoo to take his sister to her rightful place in the family. The scouts pushed through the velvet curtain and entered Sector 15. The curtain fell closed, leaving behind the city of species with the animals and people the scouts had quickly grown to love. Chapter 54. Hello. As Noah and Megan rounded a long curve on Jenkins Street, their home came into view. Little more than 50 yards away, it sat on a slight hill. Two police cars were parked in the street in front of the house. A few people were out on their lawns and front porches, curious about the commotion at the Nowicki house. "What time is it, Noah?" Megan asked. He shrugged. 9 o'clock, maybe. Noah realized his entire adventure in the secret zoo had spanned less than 9 hours. That amount seemed impossibly short, but then Noah realized how quickly everything had happened. Crossing Arctic Town, exploring the city of species, escaping the heights of the forest of flight, talking to Mr. Darby in Hummingbird Hideout, rescuing Megan from the Darklands. Every step of the way had taken less than an hour. Their neighbor, Mr. Peters, was raking dead leaves off his front lawn. As they passed his house, Mr. Peters absently lifted his head and said, "Noah," without pausing in his labors. When he detected who was walking next to Noah, he started to say her name until surprise stopped him short. "Meg?" Megan just smiled and waved. The rake slipped from Mr. Peters' grasp and was swallowed by a pile of leaves. His body stiffened, his jaw dropped, and for a second he looked as witless as a zombie. When his senses came back, he turned and ran into his house, calling out his wife's name again and again, his voice echoing of the houses and causing a commotion. As the two scouts headed up the street, their neighbors took notice of them from the windows of their homes. They poured out onto their front lawns, kicking through their leaves and slippers and bare feet. Some were silent, and others cheered. They clutched their hearts and covered their gaping mouths. Mrs. Sanders fell to her knees and began to pray. Megan was home, and it was a miracle. Noah and Megan smiled at their neighbors as they passed. To Noah, the moment was as real as anything he'd experienced in the secret zoo. Noah was bringing his missing sister home, and the streets were erupting with joy, relief, and love. As they neared the house, their mother and father peeked out their front door at the scene, spotted their children, and charged out of the house. The scouts ran to them, and they met on the sidewalk. Megan and her mother rushed into each other's arms, and Megan's mother burst into tears. She pressed her face against her daughter's and stroked her hair. Noah watched as Megan, too, began to cry, softly at first, but then more easily, until she was sobbing. Noah understood their emotions. He knew where they came from. They issued forth from a place too complicated and deep and beyond explanation to be called anything but the heart. As Noah's father dropped to his knees and partly wrapped himself in his son, tears poured from Noah's cheeks. Noah's sister was alive, and she was home. Afterword. High up in Fort Scout. 2 weeks had passed since Megan's return. Carrying a plate of sandwiches, Noah walked across his backyard, climbed the ladder to Fort Scout, and joined his sister and friends high in the tree. He set the plate down, and each of them snatched a sandwich. Already life was getting back to normal. They ate in silence, Richie picked up the binoculars, walked to the window, and scanned the zoo. "See anyone we know?" Ella asked. "Nope, not yet," he said. "Wait a minute. Look at this guy." He passed Noah the binoculars. Noah looked through the lenses and smiled. Blizzard lay on the block of ice in Arctic Town. He had stretched out his legs, crossed his paws, and rested his chin up on the top of them, as if they were a pillow. He was watching a group of curious children not much younger than Megan. Noah passed the binoculars around. The scouts shared a laugh as they recalled their own visits to the zoo before their secret journey. They spent the rest of the afternoon hanging out in the fort, telling jokes, giggling, and talking. They discussed many things, but the topic repeatedly returned to the secret zoo and the future of the Action Scouts. Afternoon turned into evening, and Fort Scout received a visitor. The visitor didn't climb the ladder to enter from below. Tiny and blue-feathered, he swooped from the treetops and landed on Noah's shoulder. "Marlo!" the scouts called out together. This was the first time they'd seen him since they left the City of Species. Marlo tipped his head from side to side and blinked hastily. In his beak he was a folded slip of paper. "Is that for us?" Noah asked. The malachite kingfisher dropped the paper in his lap. Noah stared down at it, not knowing what to do. "Any chance you'll be opening that before Christmas?" Ella asked. "If not, I'm going to go home and get a warmer jacket." Noah unfolded the paper and glanced at the signature. It was from Mr. Darby. "And it's too dark. I can't see what's—" Ella snatched a penlight from Richie's pocket, a new one, since he'd lost his other in Rhinorama, and handed it to Noah. "Here, now you can read it." Noah switched on the light and shone it across the page. Marlo sidestepped toward Noah's neck and looked down, as if he were reading too. Noah's eyes grew so big that they almost popped out of his face. "What?" Megan questioned. "What does it say?" Noah said nothing. "Come on," Richie said. "What is it?" Noah cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Darby wants to know if—" He was interrupted by the sound of his mother calling them indoors. "Coming, Mom!" Megan shouted back. She climbed to her feet and dusted off her jeans. "Let's talk inside." Noah looked at Marlo. "Can you come back tomorrow? Tell Mr. Darby I'll have an answer to his question by then." Marlo chirped twice and shot back into the trees. "What question?" Ella asked. Noah gazed at all his friends and his sister and said, "Guys, we have a lot to talk about." Before he could finish, Mrs. Nowicki called a second time. Noah said, "Mom's waiting. We'll talk inside." Ella and Megan jumped on the side and coasted to the ground. Richie climbed down the ladder and Noah slid down the rope. Together the four children dashed across the lawn to the back porch. Running made them giddy. They laughed and shouted and waved their arms in the air. Playfully, Ella bumped Richie into the hedge and Megan tripped Noah. They pushed their way inside and slammed the door on the night. Little did they know what a good thing that was, because not only had they slammed the door on the night, they'd also shut out something else. Someone was outside, hiding, watching, and waiting in the shadows. The inhabitants of the secret zoo knew this man as the Shadowist, but only a few believed he still existed. Mr. Darby and Tank were among those few. 100 years ago, the Shadowist had gone by another name. The name was de Graaf. 100 years ago, he stood on Mr. Jackson's rain-drenched porch. 100 years ago, he told a tale about a magical man named Banu. 100 years ago, Mr. de Graaf had been responsible for creating the secret zoo. And that is the end of our read-along of The Secret Zoo. I really hope you guys enjoyed this read-along. I really did. I thought it was awesome. But I hope to see you guys in my next read-along. And as always, guys, please take good care of yourselves. And thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.